Hi, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our latest Ask the Expert session. So today we're going to be talking all about brand and branding. Obviously, you can see on screen I'm here with Lucille, Fliss, and Steph, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a minute. But we'll say as we're going through this, please do ask any questions that you've got, whether it's from something you hear or just generally want to find anything out about branding. Please ask the questions. I know a lot of people watch these videos quite often on playback, so not live. Again, if you want to put the comments, questions in the comments, I'm sure the guys would be happy to answer them at a later date. So without further ado, I'll just kind of ask you guys to all introduce yourself if you don't mind, and kind of just explain who you are and what you do, and then we'll jump into some questions. I've got a few pre-sent in, so I'll start with them, and then we'll see how we go from there. So I'll go around my screen. So Lucille, are you okay to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Hi everybody, I'm Lucille. I'm a photographer and my background is in graphics and design. My business is Brand Stories by Lucille, and I like helping businesses to tell the story of what they do and share their expertise and giving them content that they can promote themselves online and on their marketing materials.
Thank you, Lucille. Steph?
Yep. Hello, everybody. My name's Steph, and my company is Walnuts. And Walnuts is a company that does unique wall murals to help businesses, basically, like I say, help use their brand in a unique way. And similar to Lucille, my background is in graphics. So that's me.
And last but not least, Fliss.
Morning, everyone. I'm Fliss, and my business is Honest Folk, which is a brand and design studio, exactly the same as others. I'm a trained graphic designer, and I worked in brand agencies on global brands and small brands for many years. And then I moved in-house, and I specialise more in brand, and I don't just mean design, so it's brand strategy, communicating a business's what they do and their story to the right type of customer. So that's what I do these days for my own clients, and it's working with SMEs to help them use their brand in the right way.
Thank you very much, guys. So the question I have, and I'll start with this one, because I know it's anyone who's branding probably knows the answer to this question, and that they've answered it a lot. Is branding just about a logo? Fliss, I'll go to you first. You can answer that one because I know it's a subject you like to talk about.
No. I think that's the common mistake, and that's why businesses don't really utilize their brand as well as they could do. So you've got the visual brand, which is all about telling a story in a visual way, because we all look at things and instantly take an opinion from the way things look. But you've also got the brand strategy and the brand communication, and that's probably the most important piece. It's about working out what exactly you do and your key messages and how you say things, and then how you say things then boils down into the visuals as well. That's
yeah. It's only a small part of the visual identity, really, isn't it? And it's just a small tool, I suppose, that graphically represents a part of what your business is. And there's so much more to branding, not just the as we all know.
You can sort of as a signature. Sometimes I think in that respect, it's your stamp and it's your mark, and it's what's often left behind. But there's a whole other piece that goes into building a full service brand. We'll go into all the different elements, but yeah, it's one part of the puzzle, really.
Yeah, I guess you could say it's your identifier, isn't it? It's like your name. It's what people identify you by, one of the pieces, but it's not all the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, I guess what this question actually is what is branding or what is brand? Obviously, it's a way of doing it, because I think Fliss picked up on that. It's a common misconception about branding that it's about your logo, whereas that is just a relatively small part of it.
So if you design a logo, that is branding, but it's only part of it. So you can develop an ad campaign, for instance, and that's branding. You can look at the brand voice, that's branding. There's all these elements that sort of in the pot that a part of the bigger picture. So yeah, that's my kind of analogy, I suppose, of it. Yeah.
I heard a really interesting quote a while ago. I think it was Jeff Bezos, who's done very well out of COVID, who said your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. And it's kind of more about who you are, what you stand for, what they think you stand for, and what your business is about. So that's why it's important to be portraying the right image to other people. And there's many forms, whether it's written communication, or for myself it would be in a photographic way, how you're portrayed by other people. It's the takeaway that they have of that. So it's quite a big part of your business that sometimes can be overlooked.
So do you think it's, sorry, Fliss?
I was just going to say, I think Lucille's really summed it up really well there. It's about communication, isn't it, branding?
Yeah.
So in a way, it's kind of more about how people feel about your business rather than what they see from your business, or just as important?
It's providing a clear image, isn't it, of you, your company, your product, your services, whatever it is. So I think it is about the concept, the conception of how people see it, but you've got to give that clear image, whatever it is.
Because people buy on how they feel primarily, and those visuals, if you keep seeing them and being consistent with those visuals, that's the purpose of the brand visuals, they'll get that feeling and they'll get those thoughts and everything that your brand conjures up. So that's why you have consistent imagery, consistent graphics, consistent voice, because people instantly recognise you and get that feeling.
Yeah, you can often do it sometimes if you're watching the telly. It's like, as a geek, guess the brand before the logo comes up at the end of it. It's kind of like you're watching something like Nike, it's just the masters at it, and you know from the feeling of an advert, the energy, the pace, the way it's shot, the demographic of who's in it, things like that, you can already start to think, oh, I think this is an ad by them, or an ad by somebody else. Or like now all the Christmas ads are coming out, everybody's waiting for the Christmas ads to come out, and you're kind of watching it thinking, oh, who's it going to be, which brand is it? And sometimes it's surprising and it's not who you think it is, and then you kind of think, well, they're maybe trying to reach out to a different audience, or they're pivoting what they're all about. But usually you can tell what the big brands are doing, and I think that's something that even small businesses can look at. And it's almost going back to that question about your logo. You could see an advert again for Nike, and their tone of voice and their strapline, just do it. They don't have to put the Nike swoosh on it anymore, because you know it's them. So when you've got a really strong, consistent brand that's over years it's built up, but they've said the same thing time after time after time, it's got into your subconscious, so they don't have to work as hard to promote themselves, really.
Well, funny enough, that was one of the questions I've had actually, is about what businesses do branding really well, who do it. So I don't know if there's any examples. Obviously you mentioned Nike there, Lucille, any other good examples you guys can think of that people could look at?
Well, I think, just going back to adverts, I think IKEA do it really well. There's something about the way that they come across. Yes, okay, we see the logo, but the styling of everything that they do through their TV ad campaigns, through their printed materials, and just how they are in store, it all kind of ties together. And I think as a brand, I think they're a really strong visual brand.
They're the brand they're my go-to example for brand strategy and brand positioning as well, because the way they've defined it is such a great example of what they stand for and what they do, and they've got really strong values. And when you actually read IKEA's values, you can see it threading through everything they do. So yeah, I think they're a great all-round example, Steph. I think Apple, obviously, are really good. People want to buy Apple phones not because of the phone. It probably isn't the best phone on the market. It's because of what they've built around the brand. And interestingly, going back to what Lucille said about Christmas ads, there was an advert on telly the other day, and I thought, this looks like an Apple ad. It looks, in terms of the visuals, like an Apple ad, but it was quite playful. But I think it was the Apple Christmas ad. It changed something, but I instantly knew it was them straight away.
Yeah.
I've not seen that yet.
I think some brands, like new ones, I really like. Not on the high street. I think they're a good brand, but it's kind of tricky for them because they're, in all intents and purposes, a facilitator for other smaller businesses. But then they've got quite a unique way of coming across as kind of very supportive. We've got our arms around you, helping the high street, that sort of thing. You get that feeling whether you see an advert on telly or if you go on their website, it's sort of putting the producers and the small business owners first and giving them a sort of spotlight. So it's kind of interesting how some brands can support each other, I guess, and collaborate with each other to get convey a message.
Yeah.
So we've had a point in from Brenda, actually. Also used IKEA as an example of a company with a strong purpose. So thinks there's a link between knowing why you exist and a strong brand. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's all about communication. And if you know why you exist and why you're doing it and who you're doing it for, then that is the most difficult part of branding, because then all the other elements probably, I would say, come easier. From experience in doing many brands, they come easier once you've defined that. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Agreed. I think that there's a lot of people struggle with that initial. Sometimes it's a bit like pushing custard uphill, is what I say. But once you've got up that hill and over, like you say, I think it comes easier because everything's a lot clearer then.
Yeah, I think I found it quite interesting. Obviously, my background was more in design and branding, but I've moved more into the photography side. But I still try and utilise that experience. So often when clients come to me and say, the usual thing is, I need some headshots for something. And I try to understand their business, and often they're like, oh yeah, I've got a brand, I've got a logo, I know what I'm doing. And then from conversations and work that we do together, and you try and say, okay, well, what are your missions, what are your values, what do you stand for? They haven't done that piece and they don't really understand. And I think from doing it, or if you're setting up a new business, if you take that step back, often people want to rush in and just get a load out there and they've got all that enthusiasm. But if you do the work at the beginning, it pays so much dividend in the end, because it's easier to talk to your client base or your niche and whoever you're targeting, and everything, like Fliss said, everything flows from it so much easier in terms of the visuals that you're going to add, looking across the board at what sort of typography and fonts do you want to use. Do you want to be really bold and brash, or do you want to be soft and delicate? How you speak? There's a huge range, but really knowing why you do what you do and what drives you gives you a better understanding of your brand, and it makes things so much easier.
And that's the whole purpose of brand. Having a design that doesn't have a job to do isn't going to do a job. If it's just going to look good and it's not doing the right job, then it's not actually going to do what it's supposed to do. So brand is all about making that design work for a reason.
So we've had a point in from Paul about an example, Gymshark as a governor. Paul, I actually know the person who's involved in branding with Gymshark, so actually I'd be delighted that you've mentioned them. So, no, absolutely. So yeah, no, it's another great example. I'm sure we can all think of lots of high-profile examples of generally good brands. But what about from a small business point of view? I've heard a number of people say, "I am only a," and insert small business. It might be cafe builder. Maybe not so people are involved with marketing, but any kind of small business people say, "I am just a." Branding isn't important. What would you say to that? Steph, I'll go to you first.
Well, it is important, isn't it? As we all know, I think for all the reasons we've just said, really, just rushing in and doing something, a logo, for instance, will probably come back and bite you at some point, because you'll go so far and then realise that you need much more than that as a business. So yeah, I don't think I've been there. Don't get me wrong. In the past, that I've seen myself as that, and obviously come round the other side. But it's certainly don't undermine yourself, I suppose. Is don't sort of look on yourself as that, because it's so much more bigger things.
Do you think, Steph, that it's an important thing to distinguish what part of branding is important for you? So I use the example of a cafe. Probably the biggest example when you're in there, how you feel when you are there is probably the kind of. I know there's other areas to it, but that would be a really important thing. Whereas if you are a small marketing agency, it might be more about the visual side, your website and your online presence, all that kind of thing. So obviously it's important maybe to distinguish the different areas. I know they all connect, but kind of
they do all
prioritized.
I think it's all about the touch points, isn't it? How your touch points with your clients, and cafes are an example of the fact that, well, in normal circumstances, you'd have your customers going in and you want them to come in and come back again. So they want that experience, don't they, of the surroundings. And if there's kind of really nothing there, then you don't get that feeling and you're unlikely to come back. So yeah, it is all about sort of deciphering what your specific touch points are with your clients. Yeah.
I think that's a key thing, isn't it? It's about the experience that you have when you're there, and that is, you're trying to create that experience in lots of different places with your brand. So yeah, a cafe, the environment, a restaurant, wherever, even a store, it's how you feel when you go in there. And then if you can replicate that on other channels as well, then brilliant, because they're being reminded of that feeling and then they're going to go back to have it again.
Yeah. And the thing with that is, it's all about being consistent then, isn't it? Because if you do one thing in one place and one thing, in another, then there's going to be this sort of disconnect here with your customer thinking, well, hang on a minute, what are they all about? And, also within your own four walls, your own employees, there'll be mixed messaging, won't there? As well, who is this business that I'm working for, and what do they stand for, and do I align myself with them? And it all gets really confusing.
Yeah. I think communication, like Fliss was saying earlier, for small businesses or independents and things like that, it's building up those communication channels with your customers. And it's so easy now on social media to speak to a really big audience, but you need to sort of have a bit of a plan and a strategy about how you're going to do that. But don't play yourself down just saying, oh, I'm just a cafe, a little tiny cafe who wants to hear from me. You could be a really important part of your community. You could speak to quite a few people, and especially now, a lot of businesses have had to pivot and put themselves online. So having assets that can help you do that, and understanding, again, goes right back to what we've been talking about. It makes it easy to know what you want to say, who you want to speak to, because then it just comes naturally and it doesn't feel forced. You can be honest about who your business is. But I think you're missing a trick if you don't try and, as a small business, you don't think it's important. I think it's just as important for the little bakery down the road as it is to Greg's. We're huge. So they do it, so why can't you? Dream big, go for it.
And I think, just touching on that, it's not just about your purpose, it's about your customer. And if you know your audience, you can, because we're not for everybody, and it's much harder. If you think you're for everybody, you can't attract everybody in. But if you know your audience and you tailor your visuals, your space, your voice, your marketing to that audience, you will attract them, because they will really want to be there because it's their place.
Yeah,
it's finding your niche, isn't it? Finding your niche and sticking with it, really.
Yeah, and speaking to them directly.
Yeah.
It was interesting that I think you touched on it, Steph, and Fliss, you kind of just did then about essentially consistency of the brand as well. Do you think that is probably the biggest challenge for smaller businesses to, especially if it's one person or maybe a couple of people, to try and be consistent, whether it's on social media, whether it's on their website, whether it's in a physical presence, to have that consistent approach can be probably quite difficult for a lot of small businesses.
Yeah. And it's very hard when lots of different people are doing things as well, because we see things that we like and we go, oh, I like that. And sometimes you think, I'll do it like that this time. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's right for who you're speaking to. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's on brand. So it can be really hard to have the tools and to know how to do things with a bit of flexibility as well, because you don't want to be so consistent that everything you put out looks exactly the same. But that's where building up a bit of a style and just setting your own rules, really. These are my colours, these are my fonts. I use imagery in this way. It's just sort of building, it's what I do and you guys do, build a mood board for yourself. So when you're doing something, you can look at it and go, right, does this fit with the mood board? Yes, I'll do it. No, right, let's look for something else.
Yeah. And giving yourself that helping hand. I think often people think, I know, like with the services that I offer, a lot of people just think, oh, it's a luxury and I can't afford that and I'll do it myself. And I'm all for, like, people, if you've got the skills to do it, then go for it. But look into how you're going to do it and how you're going to do it well. And you might have to put a small bit of investment into, say you're a florist or you're a jeweler or something and you want to photograph your finished products that you're selling, go out and buy a nice background and always take your pictures in the same place on the same background. And it sounds really simple, but so many people don't do it. And I think if you approach things as a photographer would do, or as any other business would do, and the same, like Fliss was saying, if you know these are my colours are like the affinity, like the mustards and the blues and things, why are you throwing bright pink in there? Like, this doesn't fit with you. So stick with what you know, don't overcomplicate things, but put a little bit of thought in before you start firing out loads of stuff into the world. And it can be quite simple. And once you've got a plan and you know how you're doing it, it makes it, again, so much easier. You've done a new range of jewellery, you're going to have an afternoon photographing all. You go and get the background out that you bought, you put it on the table next to the window, and you take pictures, and they look a million times better than they do in the back of your room on random in front of the carpet one, and the next one you're holding it in your hand. And just give yourself those guidelines and sort of stick with them, because it's easy when you've got a rule to follow.
It's interesting you say that, Lucille, because as people can see on screen, for example, all our names have a little box around them in the mustard colour, which is the Northern Affinity brand colour. If I'd been doing this 2 years ago, I would have just picked any random colour, to be honest. I wouldn't have even thought about it. But having been told off on a few occasions, I know the importance of this consistency. It's kind of partly why I asked that question. And it's adding, and a lot of things now make it quite easy for you to put in your brand colours and things like that, so it keeps it consistent, whether it's services like this or social media or your CRM system, things like that. You've done it once, it is actually quite often can keep doing it. So we had a few other comments and things like the social. Now I've got one here which might take basically Stefan. Oh yeah, best to take Stefan Fliss off the screen for a second, but I'll take it off in a minute. But so Samantha's actually commented about you Fliss, working with you on the branding at the moment. Feels like it's a right time now. And yes, you can see all that. I won't read it all out, but obviously someone that you work with, and she wanted to make the brand unique as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about that quickly, Fliss?
Yeah, we're working through the reason why Sam's sort of set up her own business. And this is what I do with all my clients. Talk about why, what drove you to do it. And I think this is really important for small businesses, because the majority of small businesses tend to have a driving purpose as to why they set up, and that's really powerful. And so we work through that, and then what her own values are and the way she does business, and bringing a bit of personality into it. And once you've defined that, and then what you're going to do for your customers, so it's kind of a mix between why you set up and what your customers need. Once you've defined that, it's very easy to pull out key messages and then start to think, right, well, how does this customer sort of see things, and how should I show up visually? And but it's a really powerful thing to define those vision, mission, values, because then you know exactly what you're going to talk about, and I'm not talking about that because it's not relevant to my customer. These are my messages.
It's a really interesting point actually there you make, Fliss, because so I did a webinar yesterday and it was all about PR and writing a media bio. And one of the things that came up from it was all about your background and your story. It's about where you are now. And we talked about this. A lot of people don't believe they do have a story, but actually everybody does. There's something why they've got to there. So that's a great example of where PR and branding are two things that come together really simply.
PR is it's all about how to get your brand out there as well and your presence out there. So it's an element. There's an overlap. Something when I'm doing a strategy for clients, I write a brand story. Because if you think about it, if you've got other employees and people are coming into the business, they need to learn about why the business set up and where it came from. So it's really a good thing to do to define your brand story.
Absolutely.
And looking back, I think there's an element as well in terms of heritage can sometimes be really interesting, that people often think we've been doing things a certain way. I was speaking to someone a while ago, a baker, and he's sort of taking more of the business over from his parents, and they've got 30 years of experience, and they're stepping down, this, that, and the other. And I was kind of saying, well, now's a good time to utilise them while they're still in the business and get information about their heritage, the skills and imagery of working with them, because that sets you apart. It's you might have had a business going for a really long time and think that there's nothing new or unique about you, but your story is really, really, like, I love businesses. I mean, my whole business is brand stories, and it's because there's so many. You might think to you it's not interesting, but to a lot of other people, it sort of speaks to your expertise, your knowledge, the experience you've got and what you do, and being able to convey that with your audience, it makes you unique and makes them want to listen to what you've got to say.
Yeah, I mean, the story is a big thing and a big part of what I do, really, in terms of the wall murals, because everybody, like you say, has got a story, whether it's 6 months, 6 years or longer, and people like to know about people's story, whether it's a person or a big business, and having some kind of a history to tell visually is really, really powerful, and it sparks interest, and it sets you aside as a business in amongst a field of other people maybe doing similar sort of things to what you do.
It was interesting because Caroline yesterday said that people kind of assume that a story should be a kind of a rags to riches type story. That's what they think is only interesting, but actually that is just one type of story. There's it could be anything, so it's about developing that. So I've got someone asked me a question yesterday to ask, and I'm already smiling at Fliss because I'm looking forward to the response for this. Personal branding is a big buzzword at the moment that's used a lot. So what is personal branding and why is it different from maybe the branding we've been talking about? And I'm going to go to you, Fliss, because I'm looking forward to this answer.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a bugbear about this at the minute, because I think it's a phrase that's been coined, and I think it's probably a slight misunderstanding. So branding is a business function to communicate what you do and to promote yourself. So my issue with personal branding is you can't brand an individual. We are all individuals. We like different things. Branding as a function sets rules around what you do. It has your story and your values and everything, but it then sets rules around it. And my issue with personal branding is you shouldn't set rules around you as a person. I think personal branding is actually an awareness piece about people. It's not. It's been a phrase that's been taken to mean an awareness piece about people. It's about building your presence, but branding is a business function.
Do you think it's kind of a nice it's been taken up by something that we may traditionally call it influencer marketing, or key person of influence is another kind of quite common one, and it's that really, it's not branding.
I was thinking it's probably come from the rise of like the Instagram influencer, and where people, if your business is yourself, then like Fliss says, you can if you're going to promote yourself as an influencer and only work with certain brands and have a certain image and you're very consistent with how you are and how you look and how you work, then personal branding could be applied to you in that way. And so it could work for solopreneurs and entrepreneurs in that way if what you sell is yourself and your time and things like that. But it could become a bit robotic, I suppose, in a way. It's not as fluid as like Fliss says, everyone is fluid. But you could think of, I don't know, the Kardashians. They probably have a personal brand and they're very strict about what they say and how they say and what they promote. But on an average, for the average person out there on the street, it probably doesn't apply in that kind of a way. But I think definitely within the influencer market, there is an area for it. Or if you were a business, you're the face of your business and you are prepared to have that level of commitment to the brand and who you are, then you could apply those elements. But yeah, it's kind of a bit of a grey area, I suppose. It's kind of, you have a brand for your business and you're a part of that business, not like Fliss says, we're all individuals. It's difficult.
Yeah. Do you think it's kind of come because it's something that's been fairly recent? You know, if you think back a good few years, I don't think I have ever heard the phrase personal branding. It's sort of just kind of come out of nowhere somehow. So yeah, I don't think
it's used quite a lot within photography. You get quite a lot of people who say I'm a personal brand photographer, and I think that probably means it's taken from the elements of portraiture. So they're doing portrait photography, but on a more commercial aspect. And I think that's sort of where a bit of a crossover has happened. So rather than you going in to do imagery for a business and a brand and convey them as a whole, again, it could be a life coach and it's just them and themselves. And that's what they want to promote. So they need imagery of themselves at work and to reflect who they are and what they do. But my different take on it, I wouldn't really say I'm a personal brand photographer. I'm a brand photographer who will talk about who you are, what you are, make sure that you've got imagery that conveys that, but without being really strict on it's just you. It could be more about your services, who you work with, where you work, what you do. It's a bit wider than that.
Yeah.
So we have a kind of question around that, really, and I know you've kind of covered it, but I don't know if anyone wants to pick up on that. Unclear on the boundaries of what a personal brand actually is. I guess the kind of point you're trying to make is that personal branding is not branding. Would I be right to say it's something different? But go for it, Fliss.
It's building your profile, isn't it? It's building your profile as a person, and I think personal branding is actually just a buzzword for that. In my opinion, because if you think about what a personal brand is, it's just someone putting their profile out there. And so, Mike, I would know you, and that's just your profile as a person.
So it's more to do with the title, that it's not the concept of what we might know personal branding of. You know, it's a perfectly legitimate and good thing to do for your business, but it's just the title of it. Using the word branding in it is maybe confusing, I guess.
I think it's confusing, and I think branding over the years has been described poorly, and people get confused by what it is. So I think it's just another instance of where it's been sort of a buzzword been grabbed. Branding's just
yeah.
That made the comment, I think what they're sort of saying is correct in some ways, that personal brands can be a business, and like I say, it depends how large or what the scale of your business is. If you are if the service you provide and the service you sell is yourself, and you can be perceived in that way as a business, then personal branding does apply to you. But it is a very blurred line. I think it is sort of, like Fliss says, it's kind of muddying the water a little bit. It might be over terminology that we don't need. I'm Lucille and I have a business, and the two are together. So my branding is the branding for me, the branding for my business sit together. If I'm me on my own, again, going back, as someone said similar to me, the Kardashians kind of fit it because all they sell themselves and their lifestyle. They have their own separate brands, which they promote in a different way. But when they're talking about themselves, and Kim Kardashian as a brand, she has a personal brand and a look, and you will probably never see her dressed as a goth. It wouldn't go with her brand and her values and her missions of how she wants to be perceived. But she's an influencer, so it's that kind of influencer kind of crossover.
But Kim Kardashian, the brand, is a business.
Yeah.
It's a business, it's not her. And I think that's where the confusion is. It's still a business. If you've got a brand, it's because you're trying to make money.
Yeah.
or do something, you know. You're not necessarily.
I think it's very, very American. I think.
Yeah, I think it's like I said, it's probably a number of different, should we say, concepts and ideas kind of mixed in with this influencer stuff. And like I said, there's all sorts of different things about the person being the lead on the business and being the personality, but it's not quite your personal brand.
Yeah, definitely.
So one question a lot of people I'm sure will ask is, they've got a business, they've established it might be 6 months or 6 years or 60 years, and they want to improve their brand. Where do they start? And I know it's a big question, but what type of things would you three, because you all do branding in I guess different ways, where would you start if someone came to you and said that I want to improve my branding?
So
go on, Fliss. I'll go let you go first.
Start. I can start because I obviously work with Steph and Lucille on my clients' brands. I'm doing a couple at the minute where one client's been in business for 6 years, one's been in business for 2 years, and they've got to that point and gone, our brand is just what it was out. So where to start? I always start by asking about the business, understanding the business, what they do, why they do it, who they do it for, how they work, because then you can understand their personality and build from there. So it's a strategy thing first. It's the strategy piece, and that's part of that is understanding your business plan as well and where you want to go in the future. And then I would go from there.
Yeah, with my mural work, I would say I'm more brand development than the first part. So you would come almost before me, Fliss, in a way. So by rights, at that point when I pick it up, I would be basically recapping on where they're at now with things, and then adding to it in terms of just bringing something a little bit more unique into the mix. But I think it's just about maybe just backpedaling if you're taking it from the start and just looking at your niche, looking at your target customer, asking all those questions about values and touch points and things like that. But overall, I suppose it's really be true to yourself. So you might find when you actually ask the questions of yourself and your business that actually this is not what we are. And perhaps we need to just have a bit of a recap and start again almost with the whole process of just asking the key questions and finding the answers to be able to kind of move it forward and on how you want it to.
And you might question some strategic business strategy things as well. So if you're saying we're all about being ethical, sustainability, and then you start looking at your practices as a business and you find actually that supply chain's not great, or the way we use that packaging's not great, you might actually have to change some business processes if that is what you wanted to be doing.
Yeah, I agree. I think if a client came to me, it is all about sort of going back to basics and stripping things down, and whether they're a startup or they're quite an established business, it's about understanding. For me, I like to understand who they are and what their message is, and for my sense, it's how they want to convey that message. And again, it's like Steph said, it's like you ask the same questions. Why do you do this? Tell me about your business, the services and packages that you offer. What are your missions? What are your values? What's important to you? I'll ask about their brand assets, and sometimes people won't have any, or they'll just have a logo and that's it. And you're kind of getting them to explore a little bit more about how they can develop it, in what ways. I might signpost them to somebody like Fliss and say, look, I think if you're really looking into it in a deeper way and want more strategy behind it, then sort of share them with other contacts I've got. But it's a big thing for me as well is the usage. If someone's coming to me and they're going to invest in having a photography session done, they might think, oh, I'm launching, I've got a new business and I'm launching it, and I want these images and I'm going to use them on my website, and sometimes I'll just it. You kind of think, okay, well, what about have you thought about your social media platforms? Have you thought about other marketing material you might make? And getting them to see that they might need a shoot that's going to give them a bit more longevity, that they're going to want to use it for a longer time. So when you develop the planning goes into the shoot. It's often, are we going to shoot in different locations? Those locations need to reflect who you are as a business. If you're really forward-thinking modern business, then your location doesn't suit that, and you want to be aspirational and project a certain image to the world, let's go and find a location that reflects that correctly and shoot there. There's a lot of understanding, I think, about you need to know who you are, but also it's like future-proofing it in a way, looking forward and thinking, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And start projecting that image now, and then hopefully you'll get the right clients and you'll be speaking to the right people, rather than just thinking, oh, well, right now I work at home and so on. But I don't know, it's different. Again, it comes back to telling the stories. I'm currently thinking about doing some more brand stuff for myself and getting some more imagery for myself. And a big part of who I am is I'm a working mum, I'm busy, I've got kids around, and that's part of my story that I want to tell. So I need to kind of have some images that reflect that in the most professional way that I can, but it helps me to tell that story of who I am and who my business is, and that sort of behind the scenes aspect of it, and add it into my brand or my business profile in the correct way. So it's about going, I think, drilling down and really understanding what a business is and how they want to be perceived and what's important to them, and how they want those values to come across, really.
I think I've got just something to add to that. In fact, it's a lot of the questions that you ask as well, or particularly when I'm doing my bit, is asking how you want your client to react to your brand. You know, I think that's a big question, or whoever your target audience is. If it's your client, it might even be your employees or potential clients. I think that is a big question to ask, because perhaps a lot of people may not have even thought about that. They may just be thinking, sort of looking a bit inwardly rather than outwardly, and how they want that person, whoever that person is, to react to their brand. That's important.
I've just been doing a strategy this last couple of weeks, and that is one part of the strategy. We want our audience to feel this, and this. So then you know that everything you do needs to make them feel that way.
It was really interesting. I picked up on a point that you mentioned there, Lucille, a minute ago about the kind of essentially branding is a long-term strategy. It's not like Google AdWords of getting loads of customers in overnight. And do you think that's maybe one of the reasons where some smaller businesses don't invest, I'm talking time or financially here, in branding? Because a lot of small businesses kind of by nature do look quite short term with their marketing activities and what they do, just because they have to. So do you think that potentially is quite often you get somebody who's established themselves doing what they're doing, and then they rebrand once they've got to that point when they can start thinking long term? Do you think that's a fair?
I think it changes time. Sometimes people are quite reactive, or if they've gone through a big period of growth, maybe that might suddenly, again, going back to COVID, some businesses that perhaps weren't online or weren't relying so much as being online have suddenly thought, I need to put myself into this space, but I don't know how to do it, and I don't have the assets to do it, and I need some guidance around sharing their business professionally online. I think it's different. You can see the high street's probably changed quite a lot, and you can see, I feel like, optimistically, a lot of businesses do seem to take a bit more care and attention. Startups especially, it is a part of what it's marketing, really. I think it's considering brand. You can't really market yourself if you don't really have a brand and a kind of a way to do it, I suppose. So it should be a consideration for new businesses.
Yeah, I think it's a lack of understanding of the difference between marketing and brand. And I think the brand industry is appalling at explaining what branding is. There's so many different definitions of it over the years. So there's no wonder that people are confused and don't think it's for them. And I think people know they need marketing. We need to market our businesses, but they don't know the depth of what branding involves. And it's probably the industry's fault by and large. So they instantly go, well, I need to market myself. But as Lucille was saying there, without knowing what you stand for and all that key messaging piece, which is a brand piece, you can't market yourself effectively. You're marketing a product, you're not necessarily marketing the business. And that's and marketing your business and what you do, it has much more longevity than marketing a product.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So interesting question here about measuring branding. It's not so how do you measure? I suppose the end of a project, it's kind of never ending. That would be my immediate gut reaction, is that branding is not, there's not an end point as such. It is an ongoing piece. So yeah, would you agree?
Yeah, it is an ongoing piece, but I suppose you can kind of measure. You can look back at like how many clients, for instance, you've done after you've rebranded, for instance, or a particular piece that you've put out there. I suppose you can look back and do some analysis around that, but that's not the end, because then you're on to the next thing and the next thing. So yeah, it is an ongoing piece, I would say. Yeah,
it can be a bit of an evolution sometimes as well. Like you can, I don't know, this would probably be a good way to describe it differently, but for me, someone might come to you and once you've done a shoot and you've got some assets and they're using them, things will develop over time. So they'll come back, it could be within 6 months, it could be within 6 weeks, and they might say, right, well, it can be campaign led for me. If they've got something different that they want to promote, then perhaps they'll need more imagery there. But I guess from an initial brand perspective, you need to have that strong understanding of what your brand and business is from the beginning, and have those assets and those guidelines and those rules around it. And then it may be, if you're a startup, as you begin to trade, you might start to niche down, you might start to understand your market better, and it could evolve as time goes on.
I think it depends what the project is. So brand is a function of your business and your business strategy, but branding is you might have a visual branding project. That's a project, and you're doing the actual project. So when it's finished and you roll it out, that's the end of the project, but you need to make sure it's rolled out consistently on an ongoing basis. Or you might have a branded space, that's another project. Or you might have a brand photo shoot or a brand photography style, which is consistent and you keep doing. But branding is a project, and it depends on the types of projects, but brand is your ongoing thing that should run through every thread of your business.
Yeah, I mean, it's something kind of, I guess, a general point about measuring things for me. I always, there's certain areas, there's some things that are really easy to measure. Let's say social media is exactly an example of that. You can see how many comments, how many likes, and how many retweets. So that's really, really simple. But a lot of areas of your business isn't so simple. And actually, the ultimate measure is essentially your bottom line, how much, whether it's turnover, or you could measure your business in other ways, donations to charity, whatever. It doesn't really matter, but it's kind of that ultimate, it's all part of the ultimate measurement rather than its own individual part, because having a great brand with terrible marketing is only going to have certain effect, and other way around, and all the other bits that come in part of it is just part of that whole mix that essentially comes to your ultimate measurement for your business. Does that make sense?
I think that's why it's very difficult to put an ROI on branding, because branding is through everything, but you're measuring your marketing, which you can put an ROI on, or you're measuring your sales or something.
So, one final question for me, guys, if that's all right, is around, we've kind of talked about what people have done well that you've seen. What about where, common mistakes in branding or brands do? especially maybe people who smaller businesses? What are the kind of things that to avoid doing that you may have seen in the past? Steph, do you want to go?
Well, we've talked about it already, haven't we? Let's just get a logo done. Is a real common mistake. I would say.
Slapping your logo on absolutely everything, but with nothing else to back it up.
That is, yeah. And being inconsistent, which we've also touched on. That is another one. I think, it's easily done, especially like smaller businesses who are just doing it themselves, I suppose, to start off with, and then passing for other people to do bits and pieces. But I come across quite a lot people forgetting about how important the inbound marketing. So they do advertising, marketing, branding. So they concentrate a lot on getting it all up and running and how they're seen out externally, but they kind of forget that they've got to run that right through the whole of the business internally as well. Like I mentioned before, because otherwise there will be this, they just get confused as to actually what is your business about. We can see that you're saying this outside, see all your nice little advertising campaigns and what have you, but then your staff, for instance, aren't talking the talk. And then it's like, well, I don't really kind of align myself to that, and I'm not bringing my business to you ultimately. So that's what I come across the most.
Is that a great example of where McDonald's are brilliant in terms of the staff?
Yes.
Their branding is very good because it's so consistent. And you go to a McDonald's in Leeds, Bangkok, or Sydney, and despite the language people are speaking, actually there's a very similar kind of experience.
Yeah.
Because they train their staff, and they train their staff about the business and about how to behave as well, which is branding, which is a brand.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I think another mistake could be rushing. I think a lot of people just rush to get something out there, get out quick. I need to be promoting myself, and you can sometimes make mistakes by doing that and have to backtrack or whatever. But it comes back down to having a plan, having a bit of a strategy, and the thought of which helps in terms of consistency, the whole projection of your business. If you put in that planning and that time in the beginning and think, well, either work with somebody who can help advise you and guide you, or you as yourself think, how am I going to start utilising my brand, and what other things do I need more than just a logo, and how am I going to use these assets efficiently? I think for some small businesses, visually, they might sort of think, I think that consistency piece can be quite hard for, if you're someone who gets, from my experience anyway, with imagery, if someone's, again, a florist, they might supply to lots of different weddings, and so they're getting, as a supplier, they could speak to the photographers from these weddings and be given images, but every photographer has a different style and the look might be different from them, so it's kind of having that as a thought of, well, how you can use these images within your brand and your style to keep it consistent to you, give you some ownership over what those images are, so that it feels aligned with your business and your look. And if you're not getting images that feel right for you, then perhaps you need to look at investing in a bank of things that you can utilise to start shouting about how great you are and what you do. So I think for me, it's a big mistake is just rush to market, get out there, get my logo out on everything everywhere, and it can become like wallpaper if you're just seeing the same thing set out all over the place with no variety, no interest, no kind of other visual impact. Then people will stop seeing it in a sense.
Yeah. A brand project takes months and even ongoing years, and so if you try and do it in a couple of weeks, it's not going to have the thought behind it and the understanding behind it, really.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you all three of you, and thank you for everyone obviously who's with the comments and the questions. I really appreciate that. Hopefully that's really been helpful for people watching. As I mentioned right at the start, if anyone wants to ask any questions and watching this back on replay, put into the comments or just contact me directly, and I'm sure the guys will be happy to answer anything. But yeah, thank you everyone for taking part, and I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, definitely, it was good.
Yes,
Thank
thanks for having me.
Yeah.